Chris Paul is the talk of the NBA Finals so far. He was the talk coming into the NBA Finals, which I think is it makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, but also at the same time, I semi feel bad for Giannis, who has won 2 MVPs and had his knee explode basically in front of our eyes, and then somehow got to a point where he could play in game 1, and the Bucks finally got over the hump and have made it to the finals and all that. And I think most people are just like, yeah, who cares? Suns in 4.
Yeah.
And that's Suns in 4. But no, it makes sense because Chris Paul is on the tail end of his career, Charlotte. He has never made an NBA Finals.
What?
And never happened. Never in his career. Never. Not once. I don't know if you knew about this.
16 years and he never made the NBA Finals?
And he's one of the best point guards of all time, and I think that all of that gets thrown into a blender, and suddenly we look up and the entire world is cheering for Chris Paul to at long last win his ring that he has never ever won, and it seems like that's where it's headed. I don't know. I think the Bucks are better than I think the rest of America wants to believe. But it's probably the Suns are probably going to win. The Suns should be favored, and so far they look like the better team certainly.
Well, so here's the thing that I think is very interesting about this from a human perspective is that normally going into the finals, if you have a finals centered around one guy, that guy is usually LeBron.
Yes.
And for the past 10, 11 years, Steph or LeBron have been in the finals. So that person, whoever it is, usually LeBron, has, it's been like, is he going to do it for the Cavs? Is he going to do it for the Heat? Is he going to put the team on his back? Is he finally going to have help? Blah, 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 blah. Like, there's so many storylines about this one guy. There's always a counterpoint, though. There's always someone he's up against. It's either like, well, but there's Steph Curry and the Warriors, or it's like, there's always a worthy adversary or like someone else with enough of a narrative that there's more to talk about than just LeBron. But it feels like with Chris Paul, he's the only veteran, like the only guy that I think especially like older media people can be like, oh, you love to see it. Like he's grinded it out for so long. And like there's Giannis, but he's been in the league, 6-7 years? Like that doesn't quite reach the level. So it's sort of like whatever you want to do with Chris Paul, like he's the story. After the game last night, one of the guys on ESPN said Chris Paul's the guy, the key. Tim Legler, he said this like 30 times. Chris Paul's the guy, the key to this series. And he just kept repeating over and over why Chris Paul was the guy. And I was like, oh my God, we are just like, this is it. Chris Paul is the only thing people really have to like as a meaty story. But the problem is that they're talking about him as though he has always been beloved and as though he has always been like, oh, like everybody's favorite point guard, Chris Paul. Like, oh, we love him. He grinds it out. He's had so much bad luck before, but like, here we go. It's his year. And I'm like, didn't everybody like, do people like Chris Paul?
It is confusing. It's definitely confusing because Chris Paul, hate is a strong word. I don't know if there are certainly people, everybody has haters, right? That's what Evan Turner taught us. Jesus was hated too, according to Evan Turner. But there was a dislike. There was a Chris Paul was annoying to a lot of people, certainly. Like there were plenty of reasons. Going all the way back to those who follow college basketball closely might remember he punched Julius Hodge in the nuts when Chris Paul was at Wake Forest. They were playing NC State. Tate believes that was actually justified. He's like, no, that made me like Chris Paul more because Julius Hodge deserved to be punched in the nuts. But either way, Chris Paul has had a reputation for being, if at worst, a dirty player, at best, like one of those guys that toes the line of what's acceptable and is just kind of has a lot of shenanigans going on. We'll put it like whether it's dirty or not. He's like always like he's not a great sportsman.
There's an entire YouTube category of Chris Paul flops.
Yes, Chris Paul flops. He's the king of like baiting you into something, and the moment you do it, he whines to the officials that you're doing it, whatever. And that did not go unnoticed by NBA fans, by basketball fans, and it has been talked about a lot and discussing who Chris Paul is as a player, as a way that he. Whether you're a fan of him or whatever. And you're right, we have now reached a point where all of that is thrown out the window because we're looking at the bigger picture. We're looking at how great of a basketball player Chris Paul has been, which has never been in question at any point in his career, how talented he is. We are appreciating the full length of it. We are appreciating that he's finally now has a chance to win his ring, and we are appreciating, frankly, like you said before, that like this finals is a shakeup. There is no LeBron James. There is no Steph Curry. There is no, even going back to the generation before that, the Kobe's and Tim Duncans and whatever else. This matchup is very much an anomaly in that sense, that we've arrived at the Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis Antetokounmpo, obviously great, has won MVPs, but he is not. I mean, like, frankly, he was a guy that like people thought choked in the playoffs, and like the fact that he's in the finals is kind of surprising to a lot of people. And the Suns are as great as they were this year. I mean, for God's sakes, most people thought they were going to lose to the Lakers in the first round. So I think that's what it is. I think there's just like where there is a vacuum, we have to find something to put in there. And I think now the stars have aligned for everybody to jump on the bandwagon and say, we want to see Chris Paul win this ring.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I also think, you know, in any other finals where either the Suns, who've never won a championship, and the Bucks, who've never won a championship, they're up against a team, so they become like any other finals that the Bucks are in. I think they're the story. I think it's like, can this underdog team do it? And instead, it's become Suns in 4. You know, like it's like that to me is how it's sort of shaking out. And I think, you know, I started doing sports in 2016. I have said this before. I didn't know who Kevin Durant was before I started doing sports, which is a wild choice by the people who hired me, but I'm very grateful. And so I feel like I really, you know, I caught up very quickly, not to brag, on like the current sports landscape, but filling in those gaps, there's still some things that I don't know. I feel like I'm a 11-year-old who has been following sports for the past 5 years very closely. But before that, I was 6 and I was too stupid to understand what things were. So to me, I see like, I probably only became aware of Chris Paul as somebody for the State Farm commercials. And I was like, this guy's kind of fun. And then, you know, you watch him play and he goes to the Thunder and he's kind of the elder statesman. And then he goes to, I mean, he's on the Rockets, but he has some bad luck. And then he's in the Thunder and now at the Suns. It's sort of like this redemption story. And I'm like, oh, I like Chris Paul. And I was watching the other day and it suddenly occurred to me, I was like, wait a second. Isn't there a reason people, like, I turned to the person next to me, I was like, do people like Chris Paul? I was like, I feel like if you were to just like me, if you were an alien who's just dropped in the past few years, you'd be like, what a lovable guy. But like, I think that it's like the recipe of what we were talking about. It's like, what does it mean to be likable in sports? Does it mean that you have undergone hardship, that you've put the team on your back, that you have just stuck around long enough that people, if you stick around long enough and don't win anything and you're not like a blatantly horrible person, I think people are going to start liking you. Yes.
There comes a point where us as fans put it on ourselves and we start looking in the mirror and we're like, why do we hate this guy again?
Right.
Like, what is it exactly that we hate? And I think he's a beneficiary of all the shenanigans, the word I used earlier, which is, I guess, the best way to just kind of throw it all together. The whining to the officials, the flopping.
Because it's not a situation. It's not bad enough to be a situation, but it's shenanigans.
It's shenanigans, yes. The shenanigans, I think when Chris Paul is younger, when you're a younger athlete and you're pulling shenanigans, I think everyone thinks it's Bush League. I think they think it's bullshit. I think it's a turnoff to a lot of people. But as you become the older, savvier vet, it's gamesmanship. And it's like, look at him. Look at him, just like the cerebral way he's going about this. Did you see the way he baited DeMarcus Cousins into the way he baited Patrick Beverly into shoving him into the back? But if Chris Paul's 25 years old and doing that, you're like, I hate him. I hate this guard. You know, I think there's a part of that too. Also, we should say that this country, the media in general, but I think fans as well, the only thing that we love more than tearing someone down is pretending like we didn't play a role in tearing them down when they are on the come up for their redemption. That is how it works. We shit all over somebody. We push them aside. We say, suck it. And when that person like finally has the gall to like come back or like come for their redemption, which it's not that bad because Chris Paul, again, he's not a bad guy, but in terms of like our thoughts of him, as this redemption's happening and Chris Paul is making the finals, we all wash our hands of it. We all delete all of our tweets from 12 years ago when we were like, what a punk ass bitch Chris Paul is, or whatever it is you said about him, you know? And
Probably
now all of a sudden you're like, please basketball gods, the only thing I want is for Chris Paul to finally win a ring.
It's like free Britney.
Yeah,
So everyone's acting like they weren't watching her fall apart, being
Britney.
like, "Oh, what a mess!" And now,
Chris Paul, Britney Spears, and LeBron James is the conservatorship. No,
I'm kidding. No, LeBron James is a conservative. That is their friendship. Actually, before we get to that, I have Charlotte Wilder's sports likability theorem.
Okay.
To put out here on the table. And it's that you have to meet three of these four criteria, which is that you have to be in good, funny commercials. You have to stick around for a long time. You have to put a team on your back that hadn't won anything before. And you have to... All right, maybe it's just three things. Maybe it's just those three things. But like, think about it. Or be really, really good to the point where people can't say you're not really good. Like there are people who've gone on these redemption tours. Like Alex Rodriguez, everybody hated him when he played baseball, or become a commentator who's like more fun than you were when you played sports. Do you know what I mean? Like you need some sort of turn, but I do think that commercials and lasting a long time play a big part in that.
That's a great point. How much does do we not actually like Chris Paul? We just like Cliff Paul. What if that's what it is?
Uncle Cliff.
What if we don't actually like Chris Paul at all? We just like Cliff Paul. I think another thing that really helped Chris Paul was if you're a villain in the NBA, which again, these are too strong words. I don't remember
Chris
people
Paul was
being
like a pest. He was just sort of
he
annoying.
was a pest. Exactly. He was not a villain. He was a pest. But if you are of that ilk, one thing that really helps as well is going up against an even bigger pest or villain. And I think when the Rockets took the Warriors to 7 games, and then Chris Paul couldn't play in Game 7 because he got hurt, because that's what like that's another part of all this is that his injury history, especially for big games, you start to sympathize and feel bad and want him to finally get his chance. When that happened, when the Rockets still almost beat the Warriors with Kevin Durant, the one of the best teams in NBA history, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, they take him to 7 games. They miss 436 3-point shots in a row and blow Game 7 at home. And Chris Paul had to sit on the bench and watch that whole time. I think there was some small part of that like some switch flipped where people were like, damn, if Chris Paul would have played in that game, they're taking down the Warriors. And at that point, everybody hated the Warriors because Kevin Durant had joined the Warriors, and they kind of ruined the NBA, as I've done this rant many times on the show before. So I think that helped too. I think like that was at least my moment when I was watching this, where I started to cheer for Chris Paul moving forward. And then he goes to Oklahoma City, and now he's on the side, like he's bounced around. But each time, even when he went to Oklahoma City, and now that he went to the Suns, both times he entered those new teams, he did so with there was like this discussion. The discussion around him wasn't that, okay, these teams just got a very valuable piece that's going to help them do X, Y, Z. The discussion was like, we'll put him out to pasture. And as he's like, as he's out to pasture, maybe he can teach the youngins a thing or two. And that was like all he'll do. So I think there's that part too, is that like people had already kind of put him out to pasture when he went to Phoenix. And like, this is a great opportunity for him to teach Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton and Mikal Bridges and all the young guys Phoenix have. And Chris Paul flipped that on its head and was like, no, kiss my ass. I'm not here to teach anybody anything other than how to win. And we're going to go win the ship. And that's what they're doing. So.
Right, he's like, oh, do you like these combined 53 points and assists? But that also has become sort of the story, right? Where Devin Booker's like, oh, he's a leader in the locker room, and then and I think that that's true, and I think that that's partly why people like him, because it's like watching your dad win a championship.
Yeah.
It's like there's real paternal, like, look at this guy. Devin Booker went to his camps when he was growing up. Like, now you've got Chris Paul and look at him be a general. And they're breaking down the plays, being like, look at Chris Paul. He doesn't like this shot, so he goes here. And Devin Booker knows to move over here so that he brings his man with him. And Chris Paul has a shot. It's like the son learned from the dad. Like, it's the ultimate sports, like, you can watch this with your dad, so you guys have something to talk about. You know what I mean? It's like that. It's this gift of like a Greek, one of the themes of a Greek myth. It's like fathers and sons,
He really is the most. If you're picking like the dad, well, I mean, the guy's the president of the Players Association, maybe for a reason. Because if you're picking like one person in the NBA who has like a dad feel to him, it is Chris Paul. Both in how he plays, how he carries himself.
He's an actual dad. He has kids.
There you go. There's that as well. But it is. I think that plays into why he's so likable too. And as I said earlier, like his skill was never in question when people talked about him. He's been great forever. But the way he plays the game of basketball is very old school. And as time passes, and honestly, I'm deciding whether I should go on a new rant because I'm starting to feel myself go. But like there's an art to basketball. Part of what I love about basketball is it is in a lot of ways an art form, and the ways of which people go about playing the game is beautiful. It's a beautiful game to me, Charlotte. Yeah. And I think the appeal of basketball is that Shaquille O'Neal can just be a brute force, do a drop step, dunk all over your face. And he was playing in the NBA Finals one year against Allen Iverson, who was tiny and just crossing people over and shooting fadeaways and all that, and everything in between. There's a million different ways you can have success in basketball, and it feels like as time continues to pass, and the stats nerds get their hands on basketball teams. Everything is being pushed in one direction because Steph Curry taught us that 3 points are worth more than 2, and that that if you make shots from behind this line, that's more valuable. So it does feel like the art form is slowly eroding, and this is a dramatic way of putting it, but I'm speaking in broad terms for just to make my point here. It feels like the art form is eroding, and in replace of it has become like efficiency. And it's like, if we shoot from these spots and we do it this way, and with that, it feels like a lot of the players are becoming sort of the same. Like as great as Devin Booker is he that much different than like Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell? And you know what I mean? Like a lot of these young guys are playing very similarly. When you go back in the day, and it's like, I don't know, it's like there's a bunch of different ways to go about it, and you're like, wow, this is crazy. And my point is, Chris Paul plays, and he harkens back to that time where it's like, this is an art form to me. I know the game so well. I don't mind shooting mid-range jump shots. I don't mind being a pass-first point guard if that's what it calls for. But I also don't mind scoring 30 points if that's what my team needs. The way he goes about it is a lost art, and it is a type of basketball that I think those of us who have been around for a long time watching the sport, which I'm not as young as I wish I was, he plays a style of basketball that in our minds are the old heads in our minds, we feel like it's dying. And there's some part of that too, I think, that plays into this, Charlotte. I'm sorry if that was too long of a rant.
No. I love that. I truly love that, because I think for me, for someone who came to the sport later, watching it, you see the Ja Morants, you see the Trae Youngs, you see the Devin Bookers, and they're these slippery, sort of littler, skinnier guys who are sort of slithering all over the place, but also like mostly shooting threes. And that's why I sort of, I think I talked about this during the Knicks Hawks series, because you have sort of this, like, there was an element of brute force or of like defense or hard fouls or Derrick Rose just sort of taking mid-range jumpers, and you felt like the Hawks were surprised, like they didn't know. They're like, oh, we didn't practice guarding this. And so when you see Chris Paul take the court with this like commanding dad, they call him the general presence, and he's like, you go here, I'll do whatever I have to do, like taking mid-range. Like, I think that on the back of our t-shirts for this podcast, it's gonna have to say normalize the mid-range jumper, because but I think that's what makes basketball so much fun to watch, is these different styles. And you're right, that gets condensed, and I think that you can argue that's happening, and not to get too serious, but like that's happening across a lot of different art forms. I think that you could say that happens across novels, that people saw like, oh, okay, this is the sort of beach read that people want, so we're only going to publish these. This is a sort of literary book that people want, so we're only publishing these. Like, this is the kind of movie people want, so we're only going to remake old movies from the 90s and put out Marvel films, and because that's efficient and that makes money. And I think that what you're saying about the way people play basketball is actually happening in a lot of different industries where creativity is valued. Like, you can also turn on TV, you can turn on a sports game, and I can tell you before they say it what every single commentator on a on a studio show is going to say before they say it, because it's what they have to say, because
the
it's
keys
efficient.
to the game. The keys to the game. Yeah.
And it's Chris Paul. Chris Paul's the key to the series, and it's what people want to hear, which I don't blame them for, but it's what they expect. So you give them what they want and you make money off of it. And I think that there's a real art to zigging when people zag. And I hope that we keep seeing more of that. And I hope that maybe one of the things Chris Paul is teaching these kids who say, Devin Booker, his post-game presser was just like, he's teaching us, he's a leader. And it's like, right, okay, we get it. I hope part of that is that he's teaching them you can play a different style and catch people off guard, and it'll actually be more fun.
Yeah. I think hopefully that would be great.
Wouldn't that be great?
Because efficiency is the death of art is what you're saying.
Yes.
Is that a quote? Someone said that? Can we get that?
No, I don't know. I think you might have just been philosophical.
Oh my God. Put that on a cool nature picture and in a cool font. And then
you mean an inspirational poster?
An inspirational poster. That's what I meant to say.
Titus.
Yeah. Efficiency is the death of art. Oh man.
I think you're going for something. There's some saying that is out there, but I like that one better.
Yeah, no, that's those are the feelings I have when I watch Chris Paul play. Those is exactly that. Is that the basketball is ultimately when I think I look internally and I think about what it is that draws me to this game. It is that sort of thing. It is, and I think that's it's interesting because I do find a lot of people I know that love basketball. I talk to them about the NBA and even college. This is happening, and it feels like this is anecdotal, but it does feel like people are kind of bored with the product, whatever the product is. And I don't know if that says more about what basketball's become. It says more about us as a society. Maybe we have more options. Maybe people are like, I have too much ADD now. I can't sit down and watch a game. I want to be on my phone. I don't know. But my theory is that basketball used to be played in the 80s and 90s, and not to go like it was better back then, but it's definitely different. And what made it different was that there was no consensus. There was no, this is the way to win, this is how it's done. A lot of people thought a lot of different things, and you threw a lot of ideas. And over time, we have slowly figured out which ideas have won out and which ones haven't, and we've streamlined it, and everyone goes here. And Chris Paul is stayed true to who he is, which is just making fundamental plays, not turning the ball over, not trying to dunk on people. I don't even know if he can dunk, which isn't actually true. I did see a video of him recently, in a warm-up line dunking, but he's not playing that. He's not trying to be Ja Morant. He's not. He can make threes, but that's not his bread and butter. That's not what he's doing. And he's not assist hunting in a way that's a stat padding type thing. He's
right.
I don't know. He just very clearly always makes the best play. And I think watching that for 16 years, as you start looking around the landscape of the NBA, the players now are better than they have ever been. There's no question about that. The players in the NBA are better than they have ever been. But you could argue too that the players are more homogenized than they have ever been, and that everyone's kind of similar to. And Chris Paul is not. And I think that's what makes him fun. And I think that's why we're all cheering for him. I could be wrong, but that's how I see it. So
no, I totally love that, and I feel like there's this sort of, when you watch games from the 80s and 90s, there's this sort of not sloppiness, but it's people trying to make the smart play and failing because other people caught them off guard. And now it's you put everything into an Excel sheet enough times and it comes out with a certain answer, and enough guys are everyone's definitely more skilled,
Yes.
But I do think I love the difference, and I think, that's what we've talked about a lot on this show, of trying to do, of being is it possible that there is a way to talk about sports in a way that people haven't found? And I think sometimes that's why we sound absolutely insane.
Yeah.
But also it's because
we're out there on the basketball court shooting hook shots from the free throw line. We're no one else does this. We could try this. Maybe this works.
Actually, if you do it underhand, it is more efficient, I don't know. It's just sort of and I think that that's really enjoyable. And Chris Paul he's just stuck around long enough and done it in a way
that's what
that
it is.
And I also think that when you think about highlights, right, where kids today are doing things for the highlights, there's this whole Instagram community where people, it's almost like, do you care more about the individual stats or the individual highlights or that individual video for your social platform than you do of not turning the ball over and, you know, shooting a boring shot, but it's going to go in. And it's like team versus individual in a way that it feels like Chris Paul is a very individual guy, but he's always got the team win in mind.
Yes, that's always been his mindset. And again, that is refreshing for older people, because I do find that like the people that are super excited about the idea of Chris Paul winning a title, they tend to skew a little older. It's like I doubt there are many like 15-year-olds out there that are like, oh, this is sick, man. Chris Paul, you know, there probably aren't a ton of like younger Chris Paul fans. And I wonder if that's why. I wonder if it's because he plays a brand of basketball that those of us that are a little older
I also think
like,
it's
man,
just
this is. And he's probably, he's our age.
He's related, right. It's like, oh, maybe if Chris Paul can still play basketball, I can go for a run without having to ice my foot for 5 days, you know? It's like, oh, okay.
But it is interesting how he has become likable, the arc of his likability, we'll say, because I think we should make this point too. Chris Paul has not changed. That's the other part, is that like a lot of redemption arcs, it's like a guy, I was a shithead when I was a kid, you know, I learned as I got older. I'm not like, Chris Paul has kind of been the same guy. He was getting into it with DeMarcus Cousins. Like he's already gotten into it with DeMarcus Cousins before, but he was flopping with DeMarcus Cousins. This happened against the Clippers in the last round.
I just watched that video and I was like, oh my God. And DeMarcus Cousins was shaking his head at Chris Paul in the exact same way he did like a few days ago. And I was like, haven't we seen this already?
He last year in the bubble, you might remember when they were playing the Rockets and it's going to Game 7, and Chris Paul like just at all times is in the ref's ear complaining about something, and like whoever he is, he has been that guy forever. And it's just one of those deals where it's like, has Chris Paul changed or have we changed? And I feel like we've changed. Which, by the way, I love that little idea of like if like we do this podcast and 6 years from now people are like, I don't like this show, like it's kind of changed, we just flip it on them and we're like, we haven't changed, you've changed.
Well, I mean, like, honestly, you know how people used to write in your yearbook, you know, like Hags, have a great summer, like LALAS, love you like a sister, and they would also put like never change. I got a lot in my yearbook. I found it when I was at my parents' house when I was home in Maine, and a lot of it was like never change. And I was like, so the thing about, I almost wanted to call up the people who'd written that in my yearbook and be like, look, I tried, I can't. Like I tried very, very hard to change, but you're in luck, it didn't work. So I feel like, you know, and I do respect that that's why that we've come around to Chris Paul, or that he's lasted long enough for us to be able to come around to him. And he's like, no, I've been consistent this whole time. Yeah,
anybody that's trying to make an argument that they like Chris Paul now because he's matured and because you're full of shit. I just wanted to call you out on that.
Did you watch him dive in that last series? Like, are you kidding me? He got like tapped on the shoulder and he did this. He should be in Cirque du Soleil, honestly. The acrobatics that he did, I was like, he's gonna flop and hurt his neck again. And if you think that the reason you like him now is because he's changed, you're wrong. Right. So maybe revisit why you hated him. I don't know. It's all just so fascinating.
Hey pals, thanks for watching the People's Sports Podcast YouTube channel. For more of mine and Mark's very weird rabbit holes, stick around, watch more. You can subscribe, smash that subscribe button. You know you want to. We're going to give you all the weird stuff we possibly can.